On November 3rd of this year, United States Senate Republicans blocked a bill that would have restored parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Legislation that was meant to outlaw discriminatory practices used to suppress voters. As members of the Black community that have been impacted by Republican state legislatures, we are standing here today demanding that aggressive measures be taken to modify or eliminate the filibuster to ensure targeted communities are free from discriminatory practices of voter suppression that obstructs access to the polls. We must have mechanisms in place to push back against Republican claims of voter fraud. Mr. President, now is the time to create a pathway for the passage of the John Lewis Bill and the Freedom to Vote Bill, legislation critical for our communities as well as our democracy. If you do not move quick enough protecting our right to vote, you may face the reality of losing the House and/or the Senate during your first midterm election. Mr. President, history is set to repeat itself simply because your 2022 midterm election will face that same Republican opposition that our former President Barack Obama faced during his midterm election in 2010. In closing, we have contributed a great deal to your presidency, as well as delivered you the Senate by way of the Georgia vote, all this at the height of a pandemic. Mr. President, give us a good reason to show up at the polls this November 2022. Modify or end the filibuster to protect the most non-violent tool we have, the right to vote. Thank you. Now we're going to give the mic over to Mr. Dion Green.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dion Green, founder of Fudge Foundation. As we know, gun violence is the second leading cause of death in young people in America, and the leading cause of death for Black children and teens every year. Americans are nearly killed because of Congress' inability to pass meaningful laws to prevent gun violence. The NRA-backed members of Congress continue to use procedural filibuster to block solutions to end bloodshed, like universal background checks and assault on weapons. So we ask you, Mr. President, do something. That's all I'm going to say.
Good afternoon. Mr. President, the Democratic Party at large, the Ohio Democratic Party, the Montgomery County Democratic Party, the message is simple. We are going to lose if we do not do anything. Black folks, activists, protesters, academics, people on the ground have fought really hard for the right to vote. And the Democratic Party has taken the most advantage of our right to vote, and we consistently showed up for the Democratic Party to put the people in office to look out for our best interest. However, right now, it seems that you guys are ineffective. And if you can't do anything for us, we will not continue to show up for you. We love this country just as much as anybody else, and we wanted to see it succeed just as anybody else. But we will not continue to sit back and be taken advantage of and get nothing in return. My ancestors fought for several bills. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It is 2021, and we're still trying to protect our right to vote. That's not the progress that we voted you in office for. We voted you in office to make substantial change, to fundamentally change the material conditions of Black Americans, canceling student loan debts, providing health care for everybody, getting common sense gun laws are the things that we should be working on. Yet and still, we're revisiting an issue that our ancestors took care of more than 50 years ago. Something's not right with that equation. And if you don't do anything, then we're going to stop showing up for you and we'll deal with it. Because Black people are resilient and we'll figure out a way. You'll have to figure out your own way without our help if you don't do anything.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Mr. President, there's a bill, H.R. 40, that is designed to just study reparations. It would behoove you and your cabinet to take this bill seriously, because what we're facing here in America today is not just a political issue, it's a spiritual issue. And when we read the scriptures where it says they will go into bondage for 400 years, whether you want to believe this or not, Mr. President, this is the Black man and woman that you have here in the bounds of North America. And all of this chaos and calamity that you see is because of the government's denial to give justice to the Black man and woman. Look at that bill, H.R. 40, a bill just to study reparations. Been in the government for over 30 years. Just now coming to the point where it can possibly be passed. Regardless, if you give us justice, God will give us justice. Thank you.
Mr. President of the United States, we come to you from Dayton, Ohio. We come to you insisting on protecting our voting rights. It's very strange, 10 men hold our voting rights hostage. They have taken our voice away from us, but they want us to vote, but our voice is not heard. They're breaking up our communities, and they are taking the majority of the Blacks and dividing us up and attaching it to another area where we don't get a full voting right. So what we're saying to you, how can 10 men hold a whole nation of people of color hostage because of the filibuster? Mr. President, we need you to move quickly and hard to do away with the filibuster and give us our voting rights. And we stand here in unity with Joe Madison, who is one of our classmates, one of the people of our community that have served here in Dayton ever since we were in the second grade together. So we are insisting to you, Mr. President, to deal with the filibuster. Because I see now my rights to vote and my voice is slowly being taken away. So we need an immediately act on this immediately. So we saying to you, move quickly or you're going to lose quickly the next election. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My task is to give some historical context to the struggle of voting for Blacks in America. We can trace it all the way back to the founding of this nation. When the Constitution was adopted in 1787, Article 1, Section 4, gave to the states the ability to hold elections. It gave the time, the manner, and place for elections to take place. Basically, that was okay. The problem was that the only people that could vote were white landowners. It wasn't until 1870, with the 15th Amendment, that black men, along with white men, were allowed to vote. Women were not allowed. They didn't get their chance until 1920, with the 19th Amendment. Nevertheless, even though black men had the power to vote, they took advantage of it, and we was able to get 2 senators into office, Rebels and Blanche. It wasn't until much, much later, 60 or so years later, that Edwin Brooks was the next senator, but it took a long time for that to occur. The black man, even though he had the right to vote, could not vote because they brought in black codes and black laws and Jim Crow laws that kept him from voting. Literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, all different ways and means with intimidation, threatening to take away their land. All these intimidating facts did not allow black men who have received the opportunity to vote to vote. 1957, Civil Rights Act, during the Eisenhower administration, gave us the Civil Rights Commission, which investigated those who were being intimidated from voting. The bill did not go far enough. It was amended in 1960. That didn't go far enough. It was amended in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act. That didn't go far enough. Then we had the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It has been amended a number of times since then. And 20 Supreme Court decisions have battled with that law. But praise be to God that we're still fighting. We have to fight because in 2013, Shelby v. Holder, Supreme Court decision, took away most of the rights of the Civil Rights Act. And not only did it do that, but gave to the states the ability to have different ways to disenfranchise black voters. Now we are faced with states taking away the ability for blacks to vote, still doing their tactics, still doing different ways and methods to do this. So now we have a champion like Joe Madison, who has come on the scene, a fantastic talk show host who has brought about a starving campaign. Started on November the 8th, and he's still continuing that starving campaign. And what is interesting about it is that Joe has lost some 38 or 40 pounds. And he and I used to play football together back in the days at Roosevelt High School. And we were teammates and classmates and also civil rights mates, because he was with the NAACP, made a real big name in Detroit, went on into radio talk show business, and here he is now championing that cause. I'm a member of the national movement of the Civil Rights and Human Rights, Inc., which is I'm a national board member. And we too call on the president to do something. But I need to make this announcement. People like Joe Madison, people like Martin King III, people like Reverend Al Sharpton, and other national leaders have been calling on him to do something. And I'm proud to announce this afternoon that Joe Biden, our president, had an interview this morning with David Muir on ABC and made the statement that he is willing to carve out the filibuster in order for our voting rights to take place. So we are very happy, and wasn't for the people like Joe Madison in the hunger strikes and others, maybe he would not have done this. But I'm praying to God that he will go through with it. Amen.
Hi, I'm Mayor-elect Jeffrey Mims, and I first want to thank Carlos, president of the Black Lives Matter movement here in the city of Dayton, for the invitation to be here. This is very special for me as a 1965 graduate in high school. The Voting Rights Act was passed. Shortly thereafter, just a couple years later, I volunteered to go to Vietnam. And the reason why I went to Vietnam was a fight for not only the Voting Rights Act, but to fight for all the other articles of the Constitution. As I look right now, 54 years later, I did not know at that point in time that I would have to come back and still fight for the right for us to vote. It's shameful for this nation to put us in this situation as we are right now. The filibuster issue that we're talking about right now, let me just say a little bit about filibuster. Filibuster is the legislative process that's designed to allow you to delay or to stop a vote. Delay or to stop a vote. We've experienced in the last 5 years virtually nothing coming from the federal government to address the needs of the people across this nation. The issue in terms of how we use voter fraud as a make-believe problem, when at the time that they addressed that issue, some 5 years ago, to be specific, we had 88 cases of voter fraud across the nation. Since that time, they manufactured more and more excuses and rationale, all of which have been found to be false, even in the courts, to justify some of the 15-some states that have passed legislation to minimize the opportunity for people of color and people who are poor to vote. And I want to be real clear with that. It's people of color and people who are poor. Those are the ones who are mostly disenfranchised from getting a piece of the American dream through the legislative process. So when we go through these processes and trying to get more and more of our citizens in our respective communities to come out and vote, understand the fact that in 1870, we had about an 80% participation rate in the voting process for African American men. That was shortly after slavery. That's in 1870. And here we are now, 2021. We're fighting for the issue, and the average percentage of African Americans to go out and vote, with the exception of the 2020 election, has only been about 40%. We have to do better in that whole process. We have to do better. So as we go and talk to our representatives, and those numbers are clear, and you should write these down. Let me give you a second to get a pencil and a piece of paper, or put it on your cell phone. 202-225-3121. You call that number and you give them the name of your congressman or your senator and tell them what you want. Share that number with your friends and ask them to do the same. The way we make these things happen is we get more and more people to make a call to those individuals, and more news conferences such as the one that we're doing right now, and get your message out. Now, there are many of us who are very upset, justifiably, with the kinds of things that are happening in the legislature. Here in Ohio, issues not to support school funding. We've had 4 Supreme Court rulings dating back to 1997 that says the way we fund schools is unconstitutional. And again, the court said it's people of color and people who are poor who continue to suffer the most. And we still have not fixed that situation. We have a refusal to deal with the gun violence situation, to ban weapons of mass destruction. Now again, as a Vietnam vet, I had accessibility to weapons of mass destruction for a reason. We were at war. So I had accessibility to the M16, the M60, the AK-47. We had accessibility to those weapons because those weapons were designed for mass destruction. They're not designed for people to have them in their personal possession as we walk up and down our streets here in Ohio and across the nation. So again, those numbers that you should call to talk to your senator and talk to your congressman, 202-225-3121. Thank you again, and have a great day and a great holiday season.
We're ending this. I want to thank all those speakers. I want to also thank the sound guy, Terry Matthews. I want to also thank the cameraman, Mr. Stephen Muhammad. But let's give ourselves a round of applause, y'all, because y'all are great. Y'all awesome. Y'all come out here and weather this weather. Now we get to go home and finish some Christmas shopping. Thank you guys, and I appreciate it.